Sequencing. Now, this can be a tough one for folks. It's really close to a few other fuels, but it's different enough that we decided to keep it in there as a separate identity. There were so many people who had some of these other talents, but did not respond strong to sequencing, so that really told us we were onto something. Sequencing likes to understand things at really an elemental level. Like you ever see those commercials for like a house and all of a sudden it's like, we here at this home builder, it's like all the wood slats come apart and the screws come apart and the couch is over here and the kitchen sink is over there. Like it just kind of, what they say in, diagramming explodes something, really just takes that, or like an engine, our brand new engine, the TX23K, it's like all the pistons come apart next to each other and the rods and the all the different things separate out, and then the mind of the sequencing is like, whoa, that's fantastic, all those little parts, because that pushes that and that's what that does, but it's very different from interdependence. Interdependence is like, oh, that's so cool, those gears, and they're turning because that's what those things, how they interact with each other. Sequencing is more like Legos. I always joke about the Lego Death Star. It's like thousands of pieces and takes, countless hours to make. But sequencing looks at that Lego Death Star, so to speak, and it's like, oh, wow, I wonder what else we could make. It's like, let's just throw it against the wall, because it's not a object, it's a combination of all these elemental things, and they love understanding all those different little pieces. Many times they really like fuels because it takes the individual and breaks it down into interactable parts, but they really just, if you're strong in sequencing, you really just like understanding things at their most simple, basic level. That I joke with the sequencing, it's like, oh, how are your eggs, flour, butter and milk? Oh, I mean pancakes, because they just love knowing how all these different things, it's not even so how much interact, just the elemental things that go into something. They really love understanding those things on their most simple level. And what's great having, someone with sequencing on your team is that if you're looking at things and say, oh man, my engine isn't working, theoretically, the sequencing person's kind of like your mechanic to say, well, what's it sound like when you start it? Are there any noises? You're like, oh, there's just something's wrong, it's broken. Let's throw the whole thing out. Especially if there's a project where you're like, oh, this stupid thing just doesn't work. Sequencing really is that mechanic, because they're just really good at diagnostics, because they're like, okay, well, it sounds like, things aren't firing. That's probably a problem with this, because this thing does itself, the engine's a complex set of all these different factors, that technically work together. So they can really be good with diagnostics, having that very elemental view of the world. So if you're sequencing, keep being a sequencing. There's a need out there.